safer if the teachers were armed. Speaking at a Conservative conference, he said the gun-free zones put students in danger and called on trained teachers to be given weapons to defend themselves and their students.
When we declare our schools to be gun-free zones, it just puts our students in far more danger. People that were in the Marines for 20 years and retired, people in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, people that are adept with weaponry and with guns. They teach. I mean, I don't want to have 100 guards standing with rifles all over the school. You do a concealed carry permit.
Let's talk to Mark Walters. He's a host at Armed American Radio and a pro-gun campaigner in Wisconsin. Thank you very much for joining us here on TRT World. So there were more than 11,000 deaths as a result of murder or manslaughter involving a firearm in 2016 in the US. That's the highest rate of murder or manslaughter by firearm in the developed world. So is that the price of freedom you pay for the sake of owning a gun?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I don't know that there's a price for freedom, to put it that way. I think to have this discussion rationally, a couple of things have to happen. First of all, there are a lot of people around the world and here in the United States that don't like guns, period. But we need to start from an honest position, and that is that there are hundreds of millions of guns in America that aren't going away. British-style or Australian-style gun control is not on the table in the United States. It would never work. And some of the things that get overlooked are the fact that hundreds of millions, about 105, 110 million estimated Americans use approximately 300 to 400 million firearms in this country responsibly every day. There are thousands of cases of armed individuals who defend themselves with firearms and their homes in America every day, too. So while it's a very complex issue, I believe it's a cultural issue. There have always been guns in America from its founding, and this is a fairly recent phenomenon.
Why have guns at all?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a philosophical question that would go back to the dawn of inventing firearms. I don't know. They've been around for a long time. We have them. That's where we have to start in America, and they're not going to go away. So an honest discussion has to happen there. I think you're seeing Donald Trump do some remarkable things, coming in as a conservative president, saying some remarkable things that no other administration has done in dealing with the problem that we have. And it is a problem. Nobody's denying it's a problem. Anybody who does deny it's a problem is not being intellectually honest with you or the world media. It is, but it's a problem that is fairly recent in America. We never saw these problems when I was growing up, and we have just as many guns in this country as we do today. So the fact is, we can ask why have them at all, but we do have them, and that's where the conversation has to start.
And to protect children, has it now come to the point that there's no other alternative than arming teachers? I mean, trusting a teacher with a gun in a classroom?
Yes. But it's not every teacher. Understand that I don't think Donald Trump is calling for that either. What I've been calling for on my radio programs for the last decade has been, why aren't we protecting our most precious assets? Here in the United States, our congressmen and women are protected by firearms. Our government buildings are protected by firearms. Our banks are protected by firearms. Our armored cars are protected by firearms. Yet our schools are soft targets with a big giant sign that says gun-free zone. And it's obviously been an utter failure. And what Donald Trump is doing is just responding simply to a common sense measure that says, look, let's find a way to harden these schools and stop these maniacs from entering in the first place. So it's a great place to start, but it's just the beginning of the discussion.
So you're saying it's not empty promises as before, and because there's a culture of guns in this country which is not going to change. So what is exactly a concealed weapon? How does that work?
Well, a concealed weapon is a term that encompasses an awful lot of different things. I've had a concealed firearms permit. I've used a firearm to defend my life before, back in 2002. But it is essentially a small caliber handgun worn on the body in an inside the waistband holster or an outside the waistband holster. What we're talking about here with students would be what are called a level 3 retention holster that require 3 individual processes to pull the gun from the holster. It's not something that just could be taken from somebody, much like law enforcement has in that respect. And these would be highly trained individuals like we do with our pilots. You know, after 9/11, we took control. The United States took control. And so we're never going to let this happen again. We're going to arm our pilots. We're going to harden our airports, and we're going to put armed individuals on our airplane. And no rational individual feels unsafe because there's a trained pilot with a firearm in the cockpit or possibly an armed air marshal on board. In fact, I would argue they feel much safer, regardless of their political position. You know, we heard for years in America that concealed carry laws across the United States would lead to blood in the streets in the Old West. We hear the cliches, it's going to be the Wild West all over again. That has simply not come true. 50 states in America have some form of concealed carry, and over 20 million Americans exercise their concealed carry rights across this country and do it very, very safely. We can do the same thing in our schools when it's instituted properly.
And what has changed now that this kind of school shootings are happening in the U.S.?
You know, that's a question that is beyond my pay grade. I wish I had the answer to that. I could put a stop to it immediately. But there's a cultural breakdown in the United States that comes from various different places. It's not just when you see violent movies. Is it violent movies? I grew up as a kid watching violent cartoons, and I didn't go out and shoot up a school. Nobody did. In fact, some kids took guns to school for marksmanship classes when I was a kid. It was never even on the table. So something is tearing down this culture, and I believe it's multifaceted. And yes, I believe Donald Trump, of all people, has finally started the conversation that we need to have in America to put this to rest and end this. Nobody wants this happening, and to suggest that the NRA is murderers or members of the pro-rights gun community are murderers couldn't be further from the truth. We want it stopped more than anyone because it's us that gets attacked whenever this happens. So we want to put a stop to it, and we are more than willing to have the discussion.
Well, Mark Waters, thank you very much for your time there.
Thank you.